My name is Elena Hayes, and for most of my life, people told me I was destined for greatness. I was the strata student, the girl who stayed up late studying while my friends partied. The one who believed that if you worked hard enough, you could achieve anything, and for a long time. I thought they were right after graduating top of my class in business school. I landed my dream job at RavenCore Industries, one of the most prestigious firms in the country. To me, it felt like stepping into the world I had always imagined: glass walls, sharp suits, endless possibilities. I still remember my first day sitting at my desk on the 27th floor, staring at the skyline and whispering to myself, "You made it, Elena. This is just the beginning." But dreams have a way of turning into nightmares. At first, everything was perfect. I worked under a manager who seemed charming and intelligent, someone who praised my dedication. My ideas were noticed, my projects were successful, and I thought naively that merit was enough to rise. Then came the first crack in the glass ceiling. It happened during a team meeting. I had spent 3 weeks preparing a presentation on a new client strategy. Hours of research, late nights, and endless adjustments to make it flawless. When the day came, I sat in the conference room, heart pounding, ready to present. But before I could even open my laptop, my manager, Daniel Crawford, smiled his sly smile and began, "Let me walk you through the new proposal my team and I developed." And just like that, my work, my vision was stolen, slide by slide, word by word. Daniel presented everything I had prepared, never once mentioning my name. I sat there frozen, my knuckles white under the table, while everyone applauded him for his brilliant strategy. That was the day I realized RavenCore wasn't about hard work. It was about survival. I told myself it was just one incident, a mistake, maybe even a misunderstanding. But it wasn't. Over time, Daniel made a habit of using my work as his own. The more I resisted, the more subtle his tactics became: emails deleted, documents altered, credit redirected. And it wasn't just him. The entire environment was toxic. Backstabbing colleagues who smiled to your face but whispered about you the moment you left the room. Senior executives who demanded loyalty but never offered protection. HR departments that promised confidentiality, but leaked complaints straight back to managers every day. I fought a silent war. I worked harder than ever, hoping someone would notice. But instead of recognition, I got criticism. "You're too ambitious, Elena. Maybe you should let others take the lead. You should be grateful to even be here." Those words cut deeper than I let on, because the truth was grateful. I had sacrificed everything for this job: my 20s, my friendships, even my health. And yet, no matter how much I gave, it was never enough. The final straw came 6 months later. I had just secured the biggest client deal of the quarter, one that would bring millions into RavenCore. The CEO himself congratulated Daniel in front of the entire office, calling him the company's rising star. And as the applause echoed, Daniel glanced at me from across the room. That smug smirk plastered on his face, as if to say, "What are you going to do about it?" I remember standing there, my chest tightening, my ears ringing with rage. I had built that deal from scratch, every meeting, every negotiation, every signature. It was mine. And yet, in the blink of an eye, it was taken from me. That night, I went home and stared at myself in the mirror for a long time. My reflection looked like a stranger tired eyes, a forced smile. A hollow version of the woman who once believed in fairness. I whispered aloud, "You don't deserve this, Elena. You've given them everything. And they've taken it all." For the first time, the thought of revenge crossed my mind. Not the reckless, dramatic kind you see in movies, but something sharper, colder, smarter. A plan. Because if RavenCore had taught me anything, it was this: power is never handed over. It's taken. I didn't know it yet, but that night was the beginning of something much bigger. The moment the glass ceiling didn't just crack, it shattered. And as the shards fell around me, I made a silent promise. I would not stay silent anymore. RavenCore thought they had buried me. But they had no idea I was planting seeds. Seeds of revenge. People often ask, what makes someone snap? They think it's one dramatic incident, one final betrayal that pushes you over the edge. But the truth is, it's not just one thing, it's the accumulation. It's the little cuts, the constant dismissals, the slow erosion of dignity until there's nothing left but anger for me. That breaking point came on an ordinary Tuesday morning. I walked into the office, coffee in hand, exhausted from yet another sleepless night. The fluorescent lights buzzed above, casting their sterile glow over the cubicles. As I approached my desk, I noticed something was wrong. My folders, organized meticulously, were scattered. A printed copy of the proposal I had worked on for weeks was missing. I already knew who had taken it. Sure enough, 2 hours later, Daniel walked into the boardroom with that very same document. He had altered the cover page, slapped his name on it, and now he was presenting it to the executives as his own masterpiece. I stood there in silence, pretending to take notes, while inside I was screaming. This time I didn't just feel anger. I felt humiliation. The executives nodded in approval, their eyes lighting up at Daniel's brilliance. I watched as they congratulated him, offering handshakes, promises of bonuses, and maybe even a promotion. My throat tightened, my chest burned, and then something inside me snapped. It wasn't loud, it wasn't visible. But deep down in that moment, I knew I could never keep playing their game. They had taken everything: my credit, my effort, my pride. If I stayed silent, they'd keep taking. I decided, right then and there, that I wouldn't let it happen again. But revenge isn't something you rush. It's not about throwing a tantrum or making a scene. True revenge requires patience, precision, and timing. It requires you to become invisible, to let them underestimate you while you quietly sharpen your weapons. So I did something unexpected. I smiled, I congratulated Daniel in front of everyone. I clapped the loudest, leaned in, and said, "You really outdid yourself this time." His ego swelled like a balloon, and I could see the pride radiating off him. He thought he had one. But what he didn't realize was that my smile was the mask I would wear while I plotted his downfall over the next few weeks. I began collecting everything. Emails, draft files, timestamps, calendar logs, proof that the work Daniel claimed as his was actually mine. I built a quiet archive hidden on a personal drive he couldn't touch. I documented every conversation, every lie, every slip, and I wasn't just building evidence. I was studying him. Daniel liked to think he was clever, but arrogance is always a weakness. He cut corners, manipulated numbers, and flirted a little too freely with the wrong people. He assumed no one noticed. But I did. Every detail, every fly, kept it all. The more I watched, the more I realized something important. Daniel wasn't just stealing from me, he was stealing from everyone. He plagiarized ideas from colleagues, sabotaged juniors to protect his own image, and charmed higher-ups into believing he was irreplaceable. RavenCore saw him as a golden boy, but in truth, he was a parasite, and parasites, sooner or later, kill their host. The moment that cemented my plan came during a company gala. Everyone was dressed in their finest silk dresses, sharp tuxedos, crystal glasses of champagne. The CEO gave a speech praising innovation and integrity. Words that felt laughable in that glittering, corrupt hall. Daniel, of course, was the star of the night. He basked in the attention, surrounded by admirers. At one point, he raised his glass and said loudly enough for me to hear, "Some people are just meant to lead, while others, well, they're better as support." His eyes met mine as he said it, that mocking gleam dancing in them. Something inside me crystallized that night. As the music played and laughter echoed through the ballroom, I stood alone by the balcony, staring at the city lights. And I promised myself, "You're not just going to bring him down, Elena. You're going to burn his entire empire, and you'll make sure he never sees it coming. From that moment on, I lived a double life. By day, I was the loyal employee, smiling, polite, helpful. By night, I was a strategist, piecing together the puzzle of Daniel's destruction. I started networking quietly, reaching out to people in other departments, earning their trust, listening to their frustrations. I wasn't surprised to learn that many of them had their own stories of Daniel's theft and sabotage. Slowly, I began to weave a web. Every lie he told, every shortcut he took, every underhanded deal documented and stored. I started setting small traps, little tests to confirm his patterns. I'd leave a draft document in a shared folder, incomplete and flawed. And sure enough, within days, he presented it as his own errors and all. Each mistake, each misstep became another brick in the case I was building. But I knew evidence alone wasn't enough. RavenCore's leadership adored him. They wouldn't believe me without undeniable proof. So I had to think bigger. I had to make sure when the fall came, it was public, irreversible, and devastating. The pressure grew heavier each day, but strangely, I felt more alive than ever. For years, I had been on the defensive, constantly reacting, constantly shrinking myself to fit into their mold. Now, for the first time, I was the one in control, and that power writ was intoxicating. Of course, I kept my mask on. Daniel never suspected a thing. To him, I was still the ambitious but harmless Elena, the woman he could exploit without consequence. He had no idea that every time he smirked at me, every time he claimed credit for my work, he was tightening the noose I had quietly placed around his neck. The day of reckoning was coming, could feel it. And when it arrived, Daniel wouldn't just lose his job, he'd lose everything. There's a strange calm that comes when you finally accept what you're about to do. For months, I had lived with fire inside my anger, betrayal, humiliation. But as my plan began to take shape, the fire turned into something else. Cold, precise, almost surgical. Revenge wasn't about rage anymore. It was about strategy. I remember sitting at my kitchen table one night, laptop open, the city lights flickering through the blinds. A list stared back at me. Weaknesses, patterns, opportunities. Daniel's entire life had become my study. The way he talked, the way he bragged. The shortcuts he took, every detail was another lever I could pull. And slowly, I began to pull them. I started small. I leaked hints. A spreadsheet accidentally shared with a trusted colleague that highlighted discrepancies in Daniel's reports. It's an email misplaced in the wrong inbox that suggested he was taking credit for projects he never touched. I never pointed a direct finger. No, that would have been too obvious. Instead, I planted doubting seeds in the minds of people around him. Seeds that would, in time, grow into suspicion. The beautiful part? Daniel didn't notice. His arrogance blinded him. He believed he was untouchable. So when whispers started circulating, when a manager asked casually, "Daniel, are you sure this number is correct?" he brushed it off with a smile. But I noticed the shift. The subtle side eyes in meetings, the hesitation before giving him full credit. Slowly, the pedestal he stood on began to wobble, but doubt wasn't enough. I needed undeniable proofs, something so damning, so public that no one could defend him. And for that, I had to build a trap. I crafted a project proposal, polished yet flawed in very specific ways. Looked brilliant at first glance, but beneath the surface, the numbers didn't add up. I placed it where I knew Daniel would find it, in a shared folder, unprotected, like a shiny piece of bait. Sure enough, he took it. 2 weeks later, he presented it to the senior board as his own groundbreaking strategy. I watched from the back of the room as he beamed with pride, gesturing toward the slides he hadn't created. But here's the thing. I had already sent a different version of that project to the finance department. One that was airtight and perfectly aligned with company data. I made sure to timestamp everything to leave a trail that clearly showed who created what and when. When the executives compared Daniel's flashy but flawed version with the legitimate one, cracks began to appear. They didn't call him out. Immediately, they wanted to review the numbers. But I could see the confusion in their eyes, the slight frown of the CFO. The whispered conversations after the meeting ended. Daniel thought he had dazzled them. In reality, he had just walked straight into my sneer. The beauty of revenge isn't in the final strike, it's in the tightening of the noose. The slow build of pressure until your target panics and makes mistakes. And Daniel was starting to. Sweat. His once effortless charm no longer worked the same way. People began to double-check his claims. The juniors he bullied suddenly found the courage to push back, emboldened by the quiet shift in the air. He still strutted around, still bragged loudly in the cafeteria. But I could see the slight twitch in his smile, the growing irritation when people didn't applaud him as quickly. One night, I stayed late at the office, watching from my desk as he sat in his glass-walled office, pacing like a caged animal. He was unraveling, and he didn't even know that I was the one pulling the strings. Every empire has a weak link, and with Daniel, it was his ego. He wanted to be admired, envied, adored. He couldn't resist the spotlight even when it exposed him, so I gave him another chance to shine. A confidential document conveniently left open on my desk while I stepped away. Inside it, sensitive company data altered just enough to be tempting but traceable if leaked. I didn't have to wait long. Within days, Daniel shared the intel in a meeting, trying to pass it off as insider knowledge he had cleverly obtained. What he didn't realize was that the file was watermarked with my initials, the date, and a digital tracker that linked directly back to the source. In other words, proof that he had stolen it, the moment I saw him present it. I knew I had him, but revenge isn't just about evidence, it's about timing. I needed the perfect moment, the perfect stage to bring everything crashing down. That opportunity arrived when RavenCore announced its annual investor summit, a grand event with shareholders, executives, and media in attendance. Daniel, of course, was scheduled to give a keynote speech about innovation and leadership. It was too perfect to ignore. I spent the nights leading up to the summit carefully, assembling everything: the plagiarized proposals, the falsified numbers, the stolen files. I packaged it all into a single dossier, backed with irrefutable timestamps and metadata. And then, quietly, I arranged for it to be delivered anonymously to the board of directors and the press. The fuse was lit the morning of the summit. I woke up feeling strangely peaceful. For months, my mind had been a battlefield filled with rage and strategy. But now, as I slipped into a simple black dress and looked at myself in the mirror, I felt steady, focused. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't afraid. I was ready as I entered the glittering conference hall. I watched Daniel bask in the spotlight, shaking hands, flashing that cocky grin. He had no idea the floor beneath him was about to collapse, and as I took my seat near the back, surrounded by the hum of conversation and the flash of cameras, I thought, this is it. The empire falls today. There's a silence that comes right before destruction, like the air itself is holding its breath. That's what I felt as I sat in the crowded ballroom, surrounded by glittering chandeliers, polished marble floors, and the low murmur of RavenCores. Investors sipping champagne. Daniel stood at the front of the stage, confident as ever. His navy blue suit was perfectly tailored, his smile practiced, his hair styled to perfection. The spotlight adored him, the crowd waited for his brilliance. And he thrived on it. What he didn't know was that I had set the ground beneath him on fire, ladies and gentlemen. Daniel began, his voice smooth, the tone of a man who believed the room belonged to him. It is an honor to speak with you today about innovation, vision, and the future of RavenCore. Applause echoed around the hall. Cameras clicked. Investors leaned forward with interest. He moved seamlessly through the first part of his presentation slides, flashing behind him with graphs, charts, and buzzwords. He talked about strategy, leadership, efficiency. His words were polished, almost hypnotic. People nodded, taking notes, clapping at the right moments. To anyone else, it looked flawless. But I knew what was coming, because in his hands, Daniel wasn't holding a speech he had written. He was holding a script I had fed him. Halfway through, I saw it happen. The CFO, sharp-eyed and notoriously skeptical, frowned as Daniel bragged about RavenCore's revolutionary financial turnaround. Why? Because the numbers Daniel displayed didn't match the official reports. They matched my decoy report, the one I had carefully doctored. The CFO whispered something to the CEO, who stiffened, eyes narrowing at the screen. The audience didn't notice yet, but the first crack had formed. Then it happened. Just as Daniel hit his stride, basking in applause, phones started buzzing around the room. One investor glanced at his screen, then another. Murmurs began to ripple like electricity through the crowd. Faces shifted, first confusion, then disbelief, then anger, because at that exact moment, the board members and key shareholders received the dossier I had prepared, the one that revealed everything. Proof that Daniel plagiarized proposals, screenshots of falsified spreadsheets, the watermarked file he had stolen and claimed as his own, timestamps and metadata that tied it all directly to him. Every lie, every theft, every betrayal exposed in high definition. Daniel didn't notice at first. He was too busy performing, too blinded by the spotlight. But then the room's energy shifted. No more applause, no more nods. Just cold, heavy silence. He faltered, just slightly. His eyes darted across the room, sensing the change but not understanding. His voice cracked as he stumbled over a line, and then the CEO stood. Daniel's voice cut through the silence, stern and sharp. Where exactly did you get these figures? The room froze. Daniel blinked, stammered, tried to laugh it off. Well, our internal reports, of course. IEA. I have the data, but the CFO interrupted, holding up a tablet. Funny, because these numbers don't match any of our official records. In fact, they match something else entirely, an altered document traced back to you. Gasps echoed around the hall. Investors leaned forward. Journalists scribbled furiously. Cameras turned, eager for the scandal unfolding live. Daniel's face drained of color, its perfect composure shattered. He looked around desperately, searching for support, for anyone to defend him. But all he found were cold stares and murmurs of betrayal. What about this proposal? Another board member demanded, holding up printed pages. Seems nearly identical to one submitted months ago by someone else. And this confidential file, the CEO added, his voice booming with fury. How do you explain the watermark tying it directly back to your office? Every question was a bullet. Every accusation tore away another layer of Daniel's carefully constructed image. He tried to fight back, to charm, to deflect. But his words stumbled. His excuses made no sense. The more he spoke, the deeper he sank. And as he unraveled, I sat in the back of the room, calm, collected, watching the empire he had built on lies crumble. Before everyone's eyes, it was almost poetic. The same investors who once praised him now whispered with disgust. The same executives who shook his hand now avoided his gaze. The same colleagues who feared him now smirked behind their glasses of wine. A journalist raised her camera and snapped a photo of his pale, broken face, a picture that would, within hours, headline news articles across the industry. For the first time, Daniel realized he wasn't untouchable. He wasn't admired. He wasn't respected. He was exposed. The CEO's voice thundered over the chaos, effective immediately. Daniel Mercer is suspended pending investigation. Security escort him out. The words echoed like a verdict. Daniel froze, eyes wide, mouth open in shock. He looked around, pleading silently for someone to intervene, to save him. But no one moved. Not a single hand reached out. Two guards approached, firm and unrelenting. Daniel tried to protest, to argue, but his words dissolved into desperate babbling. His confident stride was gone. He stumbled as they took him by the arms and led him away. Past the same people who once applauded him. The humiliation was complete. The room buzzed with noise, investors gossiping, journalists racing to publish, the scandal executives muttering damage control strategies, and me. I quietly slipped out the back door. Unnoticed in the chaos, the night air was cool against my skin as I stepped outside, leaving the glittering ballroom behind. I walked down the street slowly, heels clicking against the pavement, my heart calm and steady. For months, I had lived in the shadow of betrayal. For months, I had plotted this moment. And now it was done. Daniel Mercer's empire had fallen publicly, spectacularly, and irrevocably. And the best part? No one suspected me. I smiled to myself as I disappeared into the night. Because revenge isn't about rage. It's about patience, precision. Tia had one. When you destroy someone like Daniel Mercer, the explosion doesn't just end in one night. It ripples. Like cracks running through glass, his downfall spread into every corner of his life. And I watched every piece shattered. By sunrise, the story had gone global. Every major outlet ran with the scandal. RavenCore executive exposed for fraud. Suspended amid scandal, golden boy, or con artist. The rise and fall of Daniel Mercer. Investors demand answers as RavenCore faces backlash. His face was everywhere. On news sites and morning broadcasts, cross social media feeds. The photo of him being escorted out is wide. Suit disheveled, mouth twisted in panic became the image of disgrace. Memes sprouted like wildfire. His name, once synonymous with success, turned into a punchline overnight. I sat in my apartment with a mug of coffee, scrolling through the chaos. Each headline, each post, each mocking comment, it was all fuel for the fire I had started, and I savored every moment. Inside RavenCore, panic reigned. Investors demanded emergency meetings. Stock prices plummeted. Competitors circled like vultures. The CEO issued statements, vowing a full investigation and a commitment to integrity. But everyone knew the truth trust had been broken, and the damage was permanent. Behind the scenes, Daniel's allies distanced themselves. The colleagues who once smiled at his jokes now whispered about how they always suspected something. The board members who praised him yesterday condemned him today. It was a feeding frenzy. And Daniel was the meat tossed into the pit. While the world tore him apart, Daniel disappeared. No more flashy suits. No more smug smiles in the headlines. No more staged photo ops. Instead, paparazzi caught glimpses of him slouched, unshaven, sunglasses pulled low, trying to avoid cameras as he left a luxury hotel through the back entrance. Rumors spread. He had fled to Europe. He was hiding in a family estate. He was planning a desperate comeback. The truth. He was crumbling because when the spotlight turns against you, when the applause becomes laughter, and when the empire you built burns to ashes, you're left with nothing but yourself. And Daniel had never been enough on his own. It wasn't just his career that collapsed. His so-called friends stopped answering his calls. His girlfriend, always more interested in his status than his soul, vanished overnight. Even his family, tired of defending him, cut ties publicly, releasing a statement about their deep disappointment. He was toxic. A sinking ship. And nobody wanted to drown with him. I'll admit it. There were moments I felt almost guilty, because watching someone unravel isn't pretty. It's not cinematic. It's messy. It's desperate. Human. But then I'd remember the sleepless nights he caused me. The lies, the betrayal, the way he smiled while standing on top of the people he crushed, and the guilt melted away. This was justice. My justice. 1 week after the scandal broke, Daniel sent me a message. It wasn't direct, of course not. It was too proud for that. Instead, it came through a mutual contact. One of the few people who hadn't entirely abandoned him. The message was short, just 3 words. You did this. I smiled when I read it, because he was right. But here's the best part, he couldn't prove it. Not a trace led back to me. No fingerprints, no leaks, no whispers. It's just a ghost in the machine. He knew I was behind it, but knowledge without proof is useless. And Daniel hated nothing more than being powerless. Within weeks, Daniel's name was a cautionary tale. Universities stripped him of his guest lectureships. Industry events erased him from their rosters. His LinkedIn profile vanished, either deleted in shame or hacked by trolls. On social media, people dissected his downfall like it was entertainment. Threads, videos, breakdowns. Everyone had an opinion on where Daniel went wrong. He was no longer a man. He was a symbol, a headline, a joke dot, and once you become a punchline, it's no climbing back. Here's the thing people don't tell you about revenge. It doesn't heal you. It doesn't undo the past. Doesn't erase the scars. What it does is balance the scales. Daniel Mercer took from my work, my trust, my peace of mind. And now I had taken everything from him. It wasn't about rage anymore. It wasn't about anger. It was about closure. About knowing that, for once, he couldn't win. And that was enough. Of course, some people asked me, what if he comes back? What if Daniel finds a way to rebuild? I laughed, because even if he tried, even if he clawed his way back into the industry, he'd never escape the shadow of this scandal. Every room he entered, every deal he pitched, every handshake he offered, people would remember. Trust, once shattered, is impossible to repair. And Daniel had shattered it with his own hands. One night, weeks after the storm had begun to settle, I stood on my balcony, city lights glowing beneath me. I thought about the path that had brought me here, the betrayal, the planning, the execution, the fallout. And I realized something. Revenge isn't about destroying someone else. Not really. It's about reclaiming yourself. Daniel Mercer no longer controlled my life. He no longer haunted my thoughts, dictated my emotions, or thrived off my silence. I was free. And as for him, it was just another fallen empire. Revenge isn't fireworks. It isn't a cinematic moment where violins swell and the villain falls to his knees. It's quieter than that. It's the silence that follows when someone's name no longer commands respect. It's the echo of doors closing in their face. It's the emptiness they're left with when there's nothing left to cling to. That silence was all Daniel Mercer had left. And I was finally ready to hear it. It happened on a rainy Thursday evening I hadn't expected. To see him again, not really. But fate, it seems, enjoys tying neat little bows around stories. I was leaving a cafe, my umbrella fighting against the downpour, when I saw him across the street. At first, I didn't recognize him. He was thinner, shoulders hunched, suit wrinkled, shoes muddy from the puddles. The confident stride, the commanding presence gone. Then he lifted his head and our eyes met. Daniel Mercer. My ghost. My ruin. For a moment, the world held its breath. Cars splashed through water, horns blared, rain hammered the pavement, but all I heard was the steady drum of my own heartbeat. He hesitated, then crossed the street toward Melina. His voice was softer now. No arrogance, no sharp edges. It's just exhaustion. Daniel. I let his name roll off my tongue, calm and steady. He looked at me. Really looked like a man staring at the ruins of a temple he once worshipped in. His eyes weren't angry. They weren't pleading. They were hollow. You did this. He said again the same words from his message weeks ago. But this time they carried no accusation. It's only acceptance. I didn't deny it. I didn't confirm it. I simply tilted my head. You did this to yourself. His lips twitched, almost a smile, almost a grimace. Maybe. But you lit the match. I shrugged. Matches only burn when they find something flammable. You built your empire out of paper. For a second, I thought he might argue. That he might summon the old Daniel, the manipulator, the silver-tongued charmer. But he didn't. He just sighed. You've won. he whispered. Congratulations. And in that moment, I realized the strangest thing of all. He wasn't even my enemy anymore. He was just defeated. People think revenge is about making the other person suffer. And maybe it starts that way. But standing there, watching Daniel Mercer soaked and broken, I understood something deeper. Revenge is about reclaiming your power. The woman he betrayed, the one who cried at night, who doubted herself, who thought she'd never recover, that woman was gone. In her place stood me, stronger, sharper, unafraid. And he knew it. Daniel looked away as if the weight of my silence was heavier than any words. This city feels smaller now, he murmured. Everywhere I go, I see eyes watching me, judging me, laughing at me. Good, I said softly. Now you know what it feels like. His jaw clenched, but there was no fire left in him. Come back. No defense. Just a man drowning in his own consequences. He turned as if to leave, then hesitated. Do you feel better, Elena? Did it fix you? I paused. The rain drummed harder on my umbrella. For a heartbeat, I considered lying, telling him I felt nothing. But that wouldn't have been true. Yes, I said. It did. Because it wasn't about fixing me. It was about freeing me. Daniel nodded almost respectfully, and then walked away, disappearing into the blur of rain and headlights. No dramatic Tolstoy. Ending, no explosion. Just a man fading into irrelevance. And for me, that was enough. In the days that followed, I noticed something different. The air felt lighter, the city brighter. My reflection in the mirror steadier. Revenge hadn't given me joy, had given me clarity. The kind that comes when you finally close a chapter that's haunted you for too long. I wasn't defined by Daniel Mercer anymore. I wasn't the victim of his schemes or the girl who had been betrayed. I was Elena Grant, and my story was mine again. Here's what nobody tells you. Revenge doesn't end with their destruction. It ends with your choice, the choice to stop carrying their weight, the choice to walk forward without looking back, the choice to remember but not to linger. Daniel's empire was gone. His name was mud, his reputation ashes, and me. I was standing tall in the ruins, smiling, because in the end, revenge isn't about how their story ends. It's about how yours begins. I closed my journal that night, the one where I had recorded every detail of my plan, every step. Of his downfall, I wrote one last sentence. Justice isn't always served in courts or headlines. Sometimes, justice is simply watching the person who thought they owned the world realize they don't even own themselves. And with that, I turned the page, not to write about Daniel Mercer, but to write about me, my future, my freedom, because my revenge story was over. And my life was just beginning.